You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories of women walking in faith. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 9, Episode 15. Feathers is an outreach of Abiding Ministries. Find more encouragement at abidingministries.net. Well, hey, friend, and welcome to Feathers this week. Friend, I can't believe it, but we are staring down the end of Season 9. We have just one more to go after this one, so let's just savor these last couple. This week's guest is Bethany Tran, the founder of the Root Collective. I talk about it in the interview, but I was introduced to them several years back. The Root Collective employs artisans in Guatemala to create shoes so that men and women earn a fair wage and the global market benefits from their talent. Bethany has an incredible story of starting the Root Collective and then talks about the journey since then. I was so encouraged by her words, and I hope you will be too. Here is my conversation with Bethany. Well, hey, Bethany, and welcome to Feathers today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited that you're here. Let's start out. How about you introduce yourself and what keeps you busy these days?
Oh, goodness. That's a great question. Lots of things keep me busy. My name is Bethany Tran, and I am the founder and designer behind the Root Collective. And we are a social enterprise that helps provide jobs for people who need them, specifically in making shoes, which is tons of fun. So we're working in Guatemala, and that's really what keeps me busy.
I would say so.
It's a full-time and a half job for sure. So besides that though, I'm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. I live on 3 acres with my husband, our 2 dogs, our foster dog, and then our chickens.
All right. So you've gotten into the chicken world.
Yes, we have. And it's a lot of fun, except when you've got a lot of predators, which has been our fault. We've lost a lot of chickens and it's terrible. So we're like problem solving on like how we keep our chickens alive right now.
Oh, okay. So I'm just outside of Charlotte. So we should have some similar predators. What is it? What gets to them? Foxes? Coyotes?
It is primarily hawks. So we've lost quite a few to hawks. And then we think it's like some kind of like a raccoon or something has gotten a few of them. Actually, this is terrible. We used to let them like kind of free range, and then we've lost so many that I'm like, no, they're like staying locked in their coop completely until we can figure out how to make sure that they stop getting attacked. And so they're locked in their coop, and I went out the other day, and typically we find the remains of what was left from our poor dear chickens. But there was one that like there was nothing, and we were like, what the heck happened? So I went out there, it was like 2 days ago, to go check on them, and something had it up in the tree. Like we've got a tree right next to the coop, and had just dropped the...
Stop. You think it took it up into the tree and it was stuck there?
Yeah, it took it up into the tree because there is a nest. So there are some ground animals like possums that apparently like take over other animals' nests. So there is a big nest up in the tree, and I think it had taken... And this chicken's name was Lady. I know which one it was. It's terrible. So it taken Lady up the tree and, did it snacking. And then when it was done, it just dropped her into.
Oh my gosh.
No, I was like,
I don't think I can be a chicken owner.
We've had chickens for 3.5, maybe almost 4 years now, and had no problems whatsoever. Until this year. And we had moved in the meantime. So like we had relocated, probably only a couple of months after we had gotten our chickens, and we had 0 problems whatsoever. And then the hawks found them, and that has become the problem. They're like, oh, I've got a bunch of like sitting ducks over here that when I'm hungry, just go take care of the little situation.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, I do not blame you for keeping them all cooped up.
I know.
Literally cooped up.
Literally. And I feel bad because they're so used to, they've basically spent their whole lives being able to just roam around. But I'm like, no, sorry, girls. You're stuck. You're staying in here.
Oh my goodness. I feel like we need to start a prayer chain for the chickens.
Guys, pray for my chickens.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I can't handle that. Oh my goodness. Well, oh my goodness. So, and you said well, I don't know if you said it now or you said it when we were talking before, but you, foster dogs. My sister, I'm so interested because my sister did that for a couple years as well.
Yeah, it is, it's hard for sure. But it's one of the most rewarding things that we've ever done. So our foster dog that we have right now, I think is our 13th or 14th foster dog that we've had in the last 2 years. And he will definitely be our longest term. We pulled him from the shelter without knowing that he had a host of medical issues. Not that we wouldn't have pulled him, but it's one of those, like, you go into it thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to have this dog for a couple months. And then it turns out that he needs major leg surgery, which takes months and months and months to recover. And he needs it on 2 legs. So, little Bud's going to be with us for a while, but he's a really sweet boy. So.
Oh, well, that's what I was going to ask about because my sister, she had several that were kind of, I guess you would say, medically fragile, and they just were fostered until, the medical stuff was taken care of.
Yeah.
Until they were able to be adopted. So, yeah, it's so awesome. Thanks for doing that. It's a lot of work.
It is, but it's worth it.
Yes, it is. I actually sometimes when I go through my pictures, because I had I had a Canon camera, so my sister would actually come over. We have 2 dogs, so she would bring her dog over to play with our dog sometimes, and then she would have me take pictures of the dogs when they were ready to be adopted.
Oh, that's so fun.
So sometimes I will scroll through my pictures and I'll see the different dogs that she had, and I'm like, oh, I wonder how they're doing.
Yeah, it always is fun. Like, I tell people all the time, if you adopt from a rescue, especially if it's a foster-based rescue, which most rescues are, and your foster says, please keep me updated on how this dog is doing, we really mean it.
Right.
Really keep
it makes
us
it worth it, right? Like, you look and you're like, oh, they're so happy, all my hard work was worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really, it's like you, as a foster, you love this dog like it's your own for the time that you have it, and it is really hard to let them go most of the time. Some more so than others. There are times when we've had puppies where I'm like, okay, goodbye. Thank you for leaving. But for the most part, we want to know how they're doing. 'Cause it reminds you why you allow yourself to go through that heartbreak when you get to see the happy endings and you get to see how well they're doing.
Yes, for sure. I know my sister has actually done house visits and stuff or met up with a family at the dog park or something so she could see them and play with them and stuff like that. So anyway, very cool. Well, I am so excited to talk to you, especially about the Root Collective today. So you talked about that you guys make shoes, and I was so excited to get the email about speaking with you because I was like, oh my goodness, I have your shoes.
Which is always so fun.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I was trying to think of what year it must have been. I think 2015.
I think it was.
Yeah. You guys had a booth set up at the Illume blogging conference, and I think I have 2 pairs of your shoes. I have the black ones, the black flats, kind of black cloth, and then I have a cobalt blue.
Oh, yes, the cobalt blue.
Yes.
That's
and I'm telling you, it's been, 3 years, and they are almost brand new, and it's not because I haven't worn them. They have held up so well.
Yeah, they really, and I always love hearing that because I tell people that, and it's it just means something so different coming from somebody who doesn't work for my business, an actual customer of ours to say that, because they are so well made and from such good quality materials that they're going to last you so much longer than most of the shoes that, if you were to walk into a DSW or something like that and buy a pair of shoes, these are going to really last a lot longer.
For sure. And and what I love is just not an investment kind of like in my own, wardrobe. It's an investment in other people's lives. So talk a little bit about kind of your setup and how, what kind of difference the Root Collective is making.
Yeah. So in order to do that, I kind of have to back up a little bit and tell a little bit of our backstory and how we got started. So almost 10 years ago now, which is crazy. I went to Guatemala for the first time, and friends of mine had started a nonprofit called Lemonade International that was working in the slum of La Limonada in Guatemala City. This slum is considered the largest urban slum in Central America and also one of the most dangerous in the world, really just because of the gang violence that's there. And so one of the founding members of Lemonade International, who is a good friend of mine, moved down to Guatemala for a year. And when she told me she was doing this, I was like, I'm going to come visit you. And it was just this immediate, I knew I was supposed to go, which is not me at all. Like, I'm a processor. So, if I think something or I want to do something, I normally spend a lot of time thinking about it, praying about it, and, kind of figuring out, like, should I do this or should I not? Especially when it's something as big as that. I had never spent time in a developing country. But it was just this instantaneous, like, Bethany, you're supposed to go. So, almost 10 years ago now, I spent a week down there, and spent pretty much every day in the slum and started realizing really quickly that nonprofits were focusing on education, which is what Lemonade International was doing, which is very important. Not trying to, discount that at all. But what I saw was you can educate a kid all day long, but if there's no job for them after they graduate, then nothing has changed. So when people talk about generational poverty and the cycle of poverty, this is what they mean, is that basically once you really get stuck in this circle in your family, it can be very, very difficult to break out of that. And especially in communities like La Limonada, I hadn't realized really before my time there that often, and it's not just this community, but slum communities around the world, you're basically considered a second-class citizen if you live there. So there is almost like I don't want to call it a caste system, but that's almost what it is, where there would be people who live in the slum communities and they literally have to lie about their address in order to get a job. Oh, like wow. Nobody will hire them simply because of where they live.
Even if they want to get help or improve themselves, it's like everything's stacked against them.
Yep, exactly. And I was like, well, that's wrong. This is not right at all. There's no part of this that's okay. And so it was one of those, how like you see a problem and you're like, somebody needs to do something about this, and you keep waiting for somebody to do something about it. It was basically that scenario where I actually went back down to Guatemala multiple times over the next couple of years. And every time it was just kind of coming back going, somebody has got to do something about this.
So I know this is going to be like a really, really trite kind of example of that, but we have this main road that I go back and forth all the time picking my kids up from school, and somebody had dropped a big bag of trash in the middle of the road. And I probably drove by it like 4 times, and I kept going, man, somebody really needs to stop.
Yeah.
And go get that trash out of the road. But that's what we do, right? We think somebody's going to come to the rescue, but we don't think about kind of like ourselves.
Right, exactly. And that's really, it's been something I think that I've picked up on a lot in, life since then is, people complaining about something or people doing something, where they're like, they see that something's wrong and they know that someone needs to do something about it. And it just never occurs to them that it needs to be them. And I've had a few very specific examples about this happen, in the time since I've started the Root Collective, where there'll be like an area of the world. There's somebody that I'm thinking about very specifically, who she was very passionate about what was going on in the Middle East and, had gotten connected with a group of, women who needed jobs. They needed jobs, and she like comes to me in a panic and literally says, "You need to do something about this."
Oh, wow.
And I was just kind of like, yeah, but hey,
yeah,
maybe
you're the one passionate about it.
Yeah, maybe you need to do something about this. Maybe that's why this is such a burden on your heart, is because you need to do something about it. And, it's actually, I think, become part of our culture to just expect that problems are going to be solved by somebody else. And it's become something that I've really learned so much about me personally, is that like I am a problem solver, and that's probably my number one like personality trait. Like if I were to describe myself, that's what I would say, is that I'm a problem solver. But it took me 3.5 years of going down to Guatemala and seeing this problem to finally get the guts up to do something about it. And there was a series of a few things that happened, that were essentially the final catalyst. And, I had started a job at Comcast. So at this point I have made it according to American standards, right? So I'm working for one of the biggest corporations in the country on the 40th floor, downtown Philadelphia, making good money. There is nowhere to go but up when you're working at a company that big. And yeah, I was completely unfulfilled. There was no part of me that felt like what I was doing there was what I was supposed to be doing. And then I turned 30 and went through my second quarter life crisis in 5 years, going, what the heck am I doing with my life? And about 2 months after that, I watched the Half the Sky documentary on PBS, and that really just shook my world completely upside down. Have you ever watched it?
No, say that name again. What is it?
It's called Half the Sky.
Half the Sky. No.
Yeah. It used to be on Netflix, and I don't think that it is anymore, which really stinks, but you might be able to find it online somewhere. There's actually a book as well. So it was originally a book. It's written by a husband and wife team who, they're journalists. And so it's basically following around 8 women around the world who are just doing incredible things. And typically they're in countries where women are not valued. And so that makes it even more insane that they are doing what they're doing. And there is like one woman who's working in the red light district in India, trying to essentially rescue women out of sex trafficking. And there's one woman in a tiny African country where, there's like one doctor for 2 million people, and women are dying in childbirth all the time because they don't have access to medical care. And she's going into these tiny villages and training midwives, and the mortality rate is tanking. And so I'm watching this documentary, like bawling my eyes out, going, I have no excuse. Like I have literally zero excuse to not do something, because there are these women who, again, these countries, they're not valued, and yet they've decided that it doesn't matter, that they are seeing a problem and something has to be done about it. And so literally, I think it was the next day, I was like hiding out in a conference room in the Comcast Center, on the phone with Bill Cummings, who at the time was the executive director for Lemonade International, and basically saying like, Bill, I've had this idea for this business for a long time because there's this problem that's not being solved and nobody's doing something about it. Who do you know? Who do you know that makes stuff? Which is totally backwards, by the way. Like you should kind of have like a product or service before you're like, hey, I'm going to start a business.
Right. Yes.
And I did not have that. I was literally like, okay, there is this business model that I think could really make an impact. So who do you know? And that's literally how we got started, was, in a conference room in the Comcast Center. And it took a little over a year to get off the ground. And so we launched, it was 5 years ago, in November. So we just had our 5-year anniversary. And our entire model is based on providing jobs in these communities like La Limonada. And the way that we have it structured is that we actually don't employ our shoemakers. We are partnering with existing workshops down there, which was a very intentional way of doing it because we really wanted to be able to uplift businesses who understand the culture and businesses who can really just have an incredible impact in their community because they live there, rather than us coming in as outsiders. That just, I know a lot of businesses that have that model, but at least for a starting point, it just didn't make sense for what I wanted to do. So these shoes, what you said is it's not just an investment for you in your closet. You're literally investing in somebody's life, which, that's pretty incredible.
So how this works then is you're partnering with these businesses, and you're giving them, and I assume you're just buying the product from them.
Yeah, so the way that we have it structured is that we do the design work here in the States. So I do like 90% of the designing. I do also work with an assistant designer sometimes because she has like the gift of drawing, which I don't. So sometimes our design sessions are really funny where I'm like, okay, I have this idea in my head, and she's like, okay, so she's trying to figure out like what I'm seeing in my head and, turning it into something that we can essentially hand off to our shoemakers. So we do the design work here, and then a lot of our shoes have fabric on them, almost all of them actually, and we work with currently 2 different weaving cooperatives as well, which are primarily employing women, because weaving is still very much of an art form. It's very much of a cultural piece of Guatemalan history that they're keeping alive. And so all of our textiles are hand woven, and we're working directly with those groups on, our colors and our patterns. And then from there, all of that goes to our shoemakers. And we are currently working with 3 different workshops in 3 different areas of Guatemala where our shoes are actually being made. So we basically work with them on the production and the manufacturing, and then we purchase everything outright from them. So there is no risk on their part. It's not like they're, making shoes that we've got to wait to sell before they get paid. We purchase everything directly from them, and then that gets shipped to us here in the States, and then it goes to your doorstep.
Well, and let me just say, because I have 2 pairs of the shoes, the fabric that is woven in the back, it's gorgeous. And I did not know until I watched the video on your website that was hand woven. It was just amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, they're doing that all by hand. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I think it makes, really I don't know, for me, it really makes me appreciate my shoes even more.
Right. There's a lot of work that goes into every pair. And, the thing is that really almost everything that you wear is handmade to a certain degree. Our shoes are an extra level of handmade because there's almost no machinery involved in them whatsoever. As opposed to if you buy a pair of shoes from, that's made in China, there is going to be a lot of like machine stamping and just a lot of machines that are used in general. And our shoemakers are very much using what I call old world techniques. Like this is the stuff where if you buy a pair of Italian handmade shoes, our shoemakers are using those same techniques and have that same level of skill. I actually have friends who have traveled to Italy because Italy is known for their shoes. Like when something's Italian made, you're just this automatic assumption that it's extremely high quality, which it is. But I've got friends who have purchased shoes in Italy and they're like, the shoes from the Root Collective are actually a better quality than what I got when I was in Italy. So they are really, they're well made.
Mm-hmm. I believe it. Well, let's circle back to, what difference this is making. You talked about there's no way for people to get jobs. So I assume now people are being employed. What difference have you been seeing in the community and families from this? Let me interrupt this conversation for a moment to thank Dayspring, our exclusive Season 9 sponsor. So we are coming up on Christmas, and I can't think of a better time to consider gifting someone close to you with a new Bible. Dayspring has several Bibles on their website, but the 2 we have highlighted this season are the Encourage Women's Devotional Bible and the Illustrating Bible. The Encourage Bible features the CSB translation of the Bible along with hundreds of devotions and reading plans right with the Bible. I am so honored to have 2 of them included in there. The other Bible is for the Bible journaler in your life, called the Illustrating Bible. It is spiral bound, so it can lay flat, and it has extra wide margins for the journaling, and whether that's just notes or something super creative. And you can get both of these Bibles at dayspring.com.
Yeah, and this is one of those beautiful things where it's just going to continue to grow as the business continues to grow. And we've had, so Otto, who is our primary shoemaker in La Limonada, it's his workshop. He is actually a former gang member, and if you know him now, that seems just crazy, because he is this big teddy bear, and he's just really sweet. And just thinking about what his past was, I've known him for almost 6 years now. It's like, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand how that used to be you. So his goal with his business, is really to either provide jobs for people who are trying to transition out of the gangs, which, it seems like that should be something that's simple, right? Like, you join a gang, and if you don't want to be in it anymore, you just leave.
Oh no, that's a life or death thing, right?
Yeah, it often is. It is, they will threaten you. They will threaten your family. We've even seen that with when they're targeting, because they target kids to join the gangs most often, because they are more vulnerable. They're more impressionable. And a lot of times these kids do not have a great home life, or they have no home life. I've known of kids who have been on the street by themselves by the age of 9. And so they target the kids for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that they can actually send the kids out on assassination missions. And if they get caught, they will get tried as a minor instead of an adult.
Oh my goodness.
So a lot of times these kids are being sent out to just do horrific, horrific things. So if they want to escape the gangs once they're in, and they're able to do that, most of the times they can't get a job, even if they don't live in La Limonada, simply because they have been branded with gang tattoos. So the gangs will tattoo you, and it's almost like having a barcode on you, like you belong to the gangs. And if employers see that, there's no way they're going to hire you. Like, they won't hire you simply because of your past. And so it becomes, again, when we're talking about these cycles and getting trapped, they will often feel trapped. So Otto's entire mission behind his business was to either help former gang members transition into, honest employment and still be able to care for their families, or to prevent kids from going into the gangs in the first place. And that's the power of what a job can do. And we've seen people's lives just have been changed because of being able to have access to a job. And, and we've seen some really tough stories too. Otto's first employee that he had, who, I didn't get to know super well, because this was back in the beginning of things, and he was murdered within the last year. And Otto's nephew actually works with him now as well. And he is a single dad caring for his son, which, by the way, is unheard of in La Limonada. I mean, like, the traditional family structure is almost non-existent. But his wife was murdered by the gangs, and his mom was murdered by the gangs, which I found out because he actually had some tattoos, and I was asking him what they stood for, because they were just really interesting. And he told me this. I just met him for the first time over the summer, and it was just this, gosh, like, I can't. Seems like something that's so insane and so foreign to my life and, what I am used to seeing in society and culture. And yet this is just common in these types of communities. So that's really what we're trying to prevent and what we're trying to fight. And it's going to take a long time to get there. Right now, at any given point in time, there's I'd say about 30 or 35 families that are being impacted, directly by the Root Collective with jobs. But, we want to see that just continue to grow and grow and grow. Cause I really believe that, I mean, these people need Jesus. That's got to be kind of step one, but I just really believe that having an access to a good job can literally change the world. Yep.
Yeah.
It can. Mm-hmm.
It really does. Well, you've spoken to a couple things, but I wonder, obviously the past few years have not all been easy. Clearly there have been some difficult times, to probably understatement of the year. I just would love for you to speak to that, and specifically, I don't know, I just always think when God calls us to things, it's not always easy. So there's probably a lot of people listening that are going through something that they have been called to, and yet they're facing a hard time. So how have you kind of persevered through those hard times, and what sort of keeps you going?
So I have learned a lot about hardship, and I actually love that you're asking this question, because this is one of the things that I talk about most frequently on even my personal social media and in my personal conversations, is just talking about hardship, because it's dang hard. But I think one of my least favorite phrases is when people say, God isn't going to give you more than you can handle.
Oh, I hate that one.
I just, no, because I think that is a complete and total lie, because I think all that God is going to do most of the time is give you more than you can handle, because that's the only way that you're going to rely on him. If things were easy, if you're able to just, start a business like this and it's just smooth sailing, I don't need Jesus. I don't need Jesus at that point. And this has been, probably the most challenging thing that I have ever done in my life. And I'm 6 years in now with, including that startup year and then being in business. And it has been challenge after challenge after challenge after challenge, pretty much all the time. And people have asked me, they're like, do you ever want to quit? And I'm like, yeah, normally about 5 days a week. That sounds about right.
Oh my goodness.
That's probably typically where we stand is there. And perseverance and grit, the thing with grit, and I've learned to love that word, because of really what grit is. Grit is sand. That's what grit is. So when people say that you have grit, I feel like it's taken off a little bit of a different meaning than what the word actually means. But if you look it up in the dictionary, grit is sand, and sand is formed by rocks being pounded over and over and over by water. So it's just those waves coming in and slamming and slamming and slamming. It just gets refined and refined and refined. And that is really what grit is. And that's what, not that life isn't beautiful and life doesn't have its really fun and amazing and easy times. But it is often not like that. And there's so much beauty that comes from that breaking down process, that really you can only learn through hardship, and really brings out the true colors of who you're meant to be, that I just think is incredible. And doing this business has been one of the most refining things that I have ever done in my life. And like I said, I want to quit often. And somebody asked me recently, they were like, what I'm hearing from you is that when you were at Comcast, things were hard and you didn't want to be there. And yet here you are doing a business that is also way harder than your job at Comcast. And what is the difference between those two things? And it's the purpose behind it, and it's just, for me, it's understanding and realizing that, my life, if I want my life to mean something, if I want to leave the world a better place than I came into it, that's just, it's part of the price that you pay, but it's really, really worth it.
So it's really about having that why and having a purpose behind that keeps you going.
Yep.
I can imagine too that your faith has changed over the last 6 years. If you could go back to yourself 6 years ago at Comcast, what is something about God that you've learned that you wish you could tell yourself?
Gosh, that is an excellent question. I don't think that I have ever been asked that. And I think that it would be, that Jesus is always on your side. And there are many times where it's not going to feel like that. Many, many times where, I've had those days of, laying on the floor in tears and just going, Jesus, where are you in this? Like, where are you? Why is this so hard? Where are you? But then being able to look back on it later and, and understanding why you had to go through that, and understanding how much you have grown personally and how much your family has grown, because God doesn't just call you, he calls your family to things. And so my family has been called to this. And there are many times that I'm sure my husband wishes that was not the case. Don't
you love it when when we get ideas and share them with our husbands?
Yeah. And he has always been extremely, extremely supportive and continues to be. But I don't think either of us had any idea of what we were getting ourselves into with this, which was good because I never would have done it ever if I had known. That's always another thing that I say is that actually being naive that will always work in your favor.
I hadn't thought about that. Maybe you don't want to tell yourself something.
Right. And if you knew, like if I knew 6 years ago what this journey would be like, I don't know that I would have done it. I really don't. But it has been quite the learning experience and continues to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to step back just a little bit because I'm curious. I work for I don't know, I would never like to say where I work, but I work for a large bank. I'm in a cube. Actually, I work from home, but if I was at the office, I'd be in a cube. So I'm always curious because actually we've had a couple people on this season who have, at one point left kind of their corporate jobs to do something God was calling them to do. When did you know it was time to leave the corporate job?
I worked full time for 3 years during that startup year and then the first 2 years in business. And some of that time was commuting 3.5 hours a day.
Stop. Oh my gosh.
And I was training for a 10K at the time too. So it was, I look back now and I'm like, man, I had a lot of energy 6 years ago.
Do you like to punish yourself?
Apparently. I was like, I was a little nuts. And then I did actually get to work from home for probably about 1.5 years, 2 of those years. And so for me, the point hit where my husband kind of had this thing in his head where he's like, I want you to continue working until you can replace your income. And I hit a point where I was like, I can't replace my income until I'm not working anymore. Like there's no way for me to be able to do those things at the same time. Like it can't happen. And we had a few things that happened that were kind of like, okay, we're just going to do this. And one of them was that we were relocating. So at the time, when I started the Root Collective, we had just moved to Maryland. And we were only there for 2 years, 2 years and 1 day to be exact. And we were relocating to North Carolina, which is where we are now. And, working in Philadelphia, again, like I was able to work from home, but I still had to go up to Philly every couple of weeks for a few days. And so Comcast was actually paying for me to go back and forth. But I was able to drive. And, I told my husband, I'm like, I don't think there's any way that they're going to let me relocate to North Carolina and keep my job and pay for a flight for me to go back and forth. Which they did do that for some people, but my situation was very, very different. I was shocked that they let me do what I did. And so it was one of those, okay, we're moving. I'm most likely going to have to find a new job because I don't think that they're going to allow me to keep my job. And so the timing just kind of made sense to try it. And it was, I think, the thing that's really helped the business grow because I was able to focus so much more energy and time into, actually building the business rather than doing it on a part-time basis. But it's become one of those things where I consult on the side now. Like this is not my only gig. And that is a very, very, very common story where, founders are having to do a side hustle in order to be able to maintain both things. So for me, it was, the big trigger was, I can't replace my income if I am working full time. So we got to pick which one's it going to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Well, oh my goodness. I have enjoyed this so much and hearing more about it. So I'm curious if people, obviously I got mine at a conference, but tell us a little bit about all the products that you guys have now and where people can get them.
Yeah, we've got a lot of fun things. So right now we've got a few different styles of flats, which you have some of the flats, and then we also have some boots, which are, especially this time of year, my personal faves. They're fantastic. They have leather soles on them, which leather soles on women's shoes are nearly impossible to find. And it really is it's a mark of a really high quality shoe. So pretty much everything right now is online. So you can go to therootcollective.com and you can purchase, if you need help with sizing or anything like that, we can help you with that. And we do one-time free exchanges here in the U.S. So if you are a U.S. customer and you buy a pair of shoes and you're like, hey, I think I need a smaller or bigger size, we'll swap that out for you. It's really easy. But another thing that we're actually going to be doing in 2019 is we want to start doing some pop-up shops in boutiques around the country. So we've been doing some locally here in North Carolina. We just did some actually, we've got some going on in Pennsylvania right now too, which is a lot of fun. So we want to try that model and kind of see how it works. So hopefully that will be something that may be coming to your area, but you can always find everything on our website.
Awesome. Well, everybody go check it out.
Yes.
And I hope you guys come to Charlotte.
Yes, I hope so too. That would be super fun.
Yes. Okay. Well, I have so enjoyed this, and thanks again for being on today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Bethany was so fun to talk to, and I'm just such a fan of the work that the Root Collective is doing. The one thing that really has stuck out with me since we talked is the idea that if we are moved by something that is not right, then instead of waiting on someone else to do something about it, then maybe you are the one that is being called to do the something. If you're upset because there's a lack of mentorship in your church, maybe you're the one that needs to bring a group of ladies together to figure out how to implement that. Or maybe you get really upset when you see a child going without something. Perhaps you're the one to organize a Christmas present drive. There could be a million things that move us. And like we talked about, our default is to look around and wonder where the person is that's going to fix it. And maybe, just maybe, today is the nudge you need to see that you are the one being called. Or maybe that God has been calling you to do something and you've been holding off. Let me just encourage you to surrender. I don't even want to encourage you to create a to-do list. I think the first step is to simply surrender before God and say yes, whatever it might entail. As Bethany said, it probably won't be easy, but when you have that purpose behind it, it will sustain you. All right, guys, that will do it for this episode. As always, you can share the episode from one of our social media channels. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Abiding Ministries. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Season 9 finale of Feathers.